Louie T. Welcome to the 2020 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie T aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2020 NFL Draft using a brand new grading scale, 5 to 1, 5 being the highest grade a pick can receive, 1 being the lowest grade a pick can receive. We'll then tally up all those scores that I get from each and every single pick in said team's draft. We'll divide by the number of selections. That will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer out there, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first, not the second, not the third, but the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Hawks, next, Seahawks, next, Hawks, next. You get where I'm going with this. Matter of fact, as the next team up in the series is none other than the Seattle Seahawks. And this is a team that I've been amazed at their ability to continue to stay relevant. And you know what? It's probably tied to the quarterback position. Generally in this league, when you have one of the elites, you usually don't fall too far off the map. And I remember just about 2 seasons ago, everyone, including myself, expected the Seattle Seahawks to go through a little bit of this kind of rebuilding phase, if you want to say. Maybe more of retooling is what I thought it was going to be, but I expected them to miss the postseason. And somehow, some way, they managed to win 10 games, make it to the postseason. I did not see that coming, but I should have known better because A, they've got one hell of a general manager in Schneider. B, they've got one hell of a coach in Pete Carroll. And C, they've got an elite top 3 quarterback in the league in Russell Wilson. Yes, I said it for some of you out there that don't understand. Russell Wilson is a top 3 quarterback in this league. I think right now you can probably order him any way you want. Mahomes is 1, all right? And then after Mahomes, is Russell 2? Is Rodgers still 2? I think that's maybe a debate for some people to have. Either way you slice it, I don't think there's another quarterback over Russell Wilson other than Mahomes and potentially Rodgers. And so he's kept this team afloat, even with some of the talent around him waning. I think they've done a really quality job of keeping enough guys around him to keep this team somewhat relevant and afloat. I thought this was a huge offseason, though, because I thought they looked a little gassed down the stretch, so to speak, especially from an offensive perspective. And they didn't generate enough pass rush all season long. I thought that was one of their biggest bugaboos, was their lack of pass rush. And all they had really was Jadeveon Clowney that scared you on the defensive side of the football. And he was banged up down the stretch. So this was a team that limped to the finish line. And it's crazy. I say all of that, and they literally were inches within having the number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs, or number 2, one of the 2, and having home field advantage. And instead, they lose that game. They wind up with the 5th seed. They have to go on the road to Philadelphia, a game that they easily could have lost if Carson Wentz stays healthy. But they find a way to get through that game. They aren't able to get it done the following week versus Green Bay in a game that was there in the balance. And so you retool, you bring a couple more guys on, and let's see what the Seahawks are able to do. I've said this. The Seahawks are one of about 5 to 7 teams in this league that have an identity established. They know who they are. And more importantly, they know the kind of players that kind of make up what a Seattle Seahawk looks like and what this team embodies and stands for. And to me, this draft is really symbolic of what the Seahawks have been. A team that's been outside the box thinkers. They do it again in the first round. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of what they do in the first round, but this team does as good a job as identifying guys that fit the Seattle Seahawks DNA profile. And they're about, like I said, a handful of teams. The Steelers do a great job. The Ravens do as good a job as anybody in the league. I think they're at the top of the list, and I think the Seahawks are right there behind them. And figuring out what players fit their DNA profile, what guys constitute a Seattle Seahawk, I think they've done it again in this draft. Let's take a look at the 8 players selected by the Seattle Seahawks, break them down one by one. And so we'll get to their draft right now. And we start in the first round, 27th overall selection. Linebacker out of Texas Tech, Jordan Brooks is the selection. I've got breakdowns of each and every single player selected in this draft by the Seattle Seahawks, and I've got write-ups, and I'll be reading from these write-ups. And this was a bit of a surprise. because I didn't think Jordan Brooks was a first-round pick. Actually, I thought he was more of a late second, possibly third-round pick. I thought he might go late second at the earliest. But in typical Seahawks fashion, they grab a guy maybe a round or two too soon in the first round. I'd hate to see what they actually would do with the top 15 pick. You know what? I actually know what they would do. They would trade it. Okay, they would trade back in the first round and accumulate more picks. But that's nor here nor there. This isn't quite the reach that the running back out of San Diego State was a couple of years ago, or even the TCU edge rusher a year or two ago was. This isn't quite that, but it was a slight reach for me. Nonetheless, he fits what the Seattle Seahawks like to do defensively, especially at the linebacker position. You know, athletically gifted, fast, and Jordan Brooks kind of fits all of those different criteria. So 20 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, a 1 forced fumble in 2019, 33 tackles overall for loss, and 7 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 7 pass breakups, and 2 interceptions in his career at Texas Tech. This is a 6-foot, 240-pound linebacker we're talking about. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. I, as I mentioned, had a late second, third round grade on him. I thought he was going to go somewhere in that vicinity, late second into the third round. Thought he was a late day one or day two, early day two, mid day two pick. Excuse me. Let me say that. I thought he was a mid day two pick, meaning he was going to go somewhere in the span of late second to early third. So I thought he was a mid day two pick. He ultimately was a day one pick. I had him as my 7th linebacker overall in this draft. He winded up being the 3rd linebacker taken, so that was a bit of a surprise. And for me to see this guy go before Patrick Queen was damn near criminal. So I thought that was the guy that you could have selected had you wanted to go linebacker, which obviously you did, but this is the guy that you coveted. You got him. And let's break him down quickly. Speed is the first thing that jumps off the table at you. 4.5, 4.40. It's pretty much embedded in the Seahawks culture at the linebacker position. You're going to play for the Seahawks at the linebacker position. You're going to have to be athletically gifted and be able to move sideline to sideline. You're going to have a range. They don't have many 2-down bangers in Seattle. That's not what they produce. They would rather take an ex-safety and convert him to linebacker before they take a guy that's a 2-down linebacker and a banger inside but can't run. That's just not what they do in Seattle. So this makes a ton of sense from that standpoint. Quickness. I think that to me is his best attribute. Not necessarily the speed, but the quickness that he shows on a snap-in, snap-out basis, especially when he diagnoses a play and is able to get to a spot, beat the blocker there, and get in the backfield, make a tackle for a loss. That, to me, is when he's at his best with the quickness he shows at the line of scrimmage to be able to slither and turn sideways and get skinny, get into the backfield. Speaking of which, ability to slip blocks is his next strength. This is a guy that, on tape, you watch him, and I have an issue with him on tape. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I was able to get past that because he just kept making plays. And one of the things he did routinely was he was able to slip blocks. He was able to go around them and get to the spot quicker than the offensive lineman could to make plays. And part of the reason he was able to do that is the next strength. Rapid diagnosis leads to quick downhill attack. So his ability to diagnose what the offense is doing allowed him to react quickly and be somewhat proactive in getting downhill, attacking aggressively, and getting to the ball carrier. Shadow boxes with backs well at the line of scrimmage. And what I mean by that is, running backs tend to do a lot of things at the line of scrimmage once they have the football in their hand. What running backs want to do, especially the very patient ones, is they want to play games with you at the line of scrimmage. They want to act as if they're going up the A gap on the left side, but then end up going on the B gap on the opposite side. And what that does is it gets you to commit as a linebacker and gets you caught up in the trash, gets you caught up in the wash. And now he's able to get to the second level and possibly the third level unabated. And so he does a great job of not overcommitting to that running back. That running back may fake as if he's going into the A gap on one side and then ultimately cut it back into the A gap on the other side or the B gap on the other side. He doesn't fall for the banana in the tailpipe early on in that rep. He stays patient and is able to mirror what that running back does and then finally meet him in the hole whenever that running back decides to commit. He's able to meet him there at the apex and get to that ball carrier and stop it from becoming a big gain. So he does a really good job of shadowing running backs at the line of scrimmage. Consistent production for 4 straight seasons. This guy was a tackling machine at Texas Tech, and he was the guy that they heavily relied on at Texas Tech, and he came through and delivered for them year after year after year after year. And there's something to be said about consistent production throughout your collegiate career. And I get it. It's the Big 12 and the defense at times isn't a priority. But to see a guy like Jordan Brooks put up the numbers he did in the conference that he did kind of speaks volumes as to the type of player that he was at Texas Tech. Does a really quality job of sifting through bodies to get to the ball carrier. That's also another big trait for a linebacker because it's so easy to get caught up on a block. It's so easy to get caught up in the wash, pick the wrong gap or have a guy get a piece of you and all of a sudden you get caught up in the abyss and you're no longer a part of the play. And all of a sudden a run that if you were able to keep yourself clean and free would have gone for 2 yards is now going for 12 yards. It's a major difference. And this is a guy that is able to sift his way through the garbage and the minutia and get to the ball carrier. And, it's fun watching linebackers be able to navigate their way through traffic because we watch a ton of linebackers going through this process that can't get their way through the trash, that find a way to get stuck on a tight end or a fullback or a guard that's pulling or that tackle that came off of that block and got to the second level and find it really hard to get through the trash, or that guard or that center that was able to climb to the second level. They find it tough to navigate their way through. Here's a guy that's able to do that. So again, another impressive trait from Jordan Brooks. His weaknesses can't help, and this was the biggest thing and it's not really a knock. It's just something that I felt watching him. I've seen a bunch of 6-foot linebackers in my day. This has to be the smallest looking one on film for me. Can't help but think that this guy looks really tiny on film. I thought to myself, man, this guy looks like he's 5'9". I watched him and look, again, I've seen a bunch of 6-foot backers and most linebackers are right around 6 feet, he just looked small to me, but look, they measured him. He's 6 feet. I understand that. He looked small on tape. Maybe it's just me. Not a real factor in pass coverage. His drops are sort of meh, with really no purpose intended with his drops, it seems like. Like, he's just dropping to say, hey, I got a zone drop. I'm supposed to get about 5 to 7 yards of depth here, so I'm going to do that. But he's not really looking to deter the quarterback. If this guy's running a shallow cross in his vicinity or there's a dig route coming in behind him, he's not looking really to pattern match. He's not looking to force the quarterback to turn down that option. He's kind of just doing what he perceived to be his job. And at the next level, you've got to be better than just doing your job. You've got to be able to not only cover your space, but also pick up a receiver and sort of play man coverage while he's in your zone. It's called pattern matching. He's got to get better at that. He doesn't do it really at all. He's just kind of just dropping into space and saying, yep, I'm doing my job. I dropped 7 yards at a 37-degree angle, and you're not supposed to throw it now because I'm standing here. And that's not how it works. And he's got to get better in that regard. Seems to lose energy late in reps if blocked, number one, or if time passes on a drive or throughout the game. And what I'm really calling into question here is his endurance. As you watch him on a particular drive, let's say a team's on a 12-play drive, he looks gassed and he starts to move slower and slower, and he becomes less and less of a factor. Let's say that a team, and it's not uncommon in college football or just in the Big 12 in general for a team to have up over 100 plays in a game or 90 some odd plays. You know how college football is. There are games where teams score 30, 40 some odd points in the first half and a bunch of plays are being run or explosive plays are happening. Anyhow, he's a guy that just seems to lose energy as a rep goes on, as a drive goes on, as a game goes on. I don't sense the same type of energy from him. Snap in, snap out all game long for 4 quarters. Maybe it's just me, but I just felt like he's a guy that maybe could use some better conditioning. I think he could get himself into a little bit better of shape. And, maybe that will happen once he gets into the Seahawks strength and conditioning program. But look, he played a bunch of snaps at Texas Tech, and I don't want to take anything away from him. My pro for him, or my comp for him, is Demario Davis. I see a lot of Demario Davis in him. And I'll take it a step further. Because of the culture in Seattle, I don't hate this pick. I thought it was early for him, especially being that Patrick Queen was on the board, and I thought he was a much better linebacker than Jordan Brooks. But this was a guy that they identified. This is a guy that they want. I've talked about this over the years. It's something that drives me nuts with the Seahawks. They're the smartest guys in the room, or at least they perceive themselves to be. And so while everybody's looking at a position or a draft in one way, the Seahawks are looking at it from a totally different way. If you're looking at a draft like this, with the paper facing this way, the Seahawks are looking at it like this, or even upside down. They see it totally different. And taking a guy like Jordan Brooks for me in the first round, especially over a guy like Patrick Queen, is borderline insane. But when you think about it from the perspective of the Seahawks, who this is what they do. I don't have a problem with it, and he's actually a good football player. He's not a reach. So in the regard of and I shouldn't do this, but I'm actually just looking at some of the reaches they've had in the past couple of years, and I'm kind of comparing it to this year's reach, if you will. And it's not that big of a reach when you look at the reach 2 years ago or last year. So I guess in that regard, it's not that bad, but I shouldn't do that. It's still a reach nonetheless. But I like the player. And I said all of that to say this. In the first round, 27th pick overall, linebacker Jordan Brooks out of Texas Tech for me is a 4. He's a good football player. He fits a need for the Seattle Seahawks. He's going to fit in like hand and glove, and I think it's ultimately going to be a good selection for them when it's all said and done. We move on to the next selection in this draft for the Seattle Seahawks. Second round, 48th overall selection, edge rusher out of Tennessee. Darrell Taylor is the pick, and I love this selection for the Seattle Seahawks, and here's why. This guy has all the traits, all the attributes you're looking for from an edge rusher, and he's just unrefined. He needs a lot of work from a technical standpoint, but this is what the Seahawks do. To me, the Seahawks are one of the best teams in the league at getting more out of less. Well, here's an example of a guy having a bunch of talent, but just needing it to be blossomed and cultivated. Well, the Seahawks do that great too. I looked at Frank Clark coming out of Michigan and saying, there's not really that much there. I'm not overly impressed with Frank Clark. By the time he left Seattle, I thought Frank Clark's a damn good edge rusher in this league. And that's what the Seahawks do. They take guys that are really unheralded, guys that are lesser players that you look at as maybe something you could discard and leave on the curbside and allow the trash man to come pick up. They scoop it up and they say, we can do something with this. They put a little OE on it, some old English, shine it up. And all of a sudden, that guy's playing quality football for the Seattle Seahawks. This is not that. This is some good stuff here that I thought had a chance to be a good player in this league, potentially, if he landed with the right team. And I think he landed with the perfect team. So 6'4", 267 pounds, 33-inch arm stands, Darrell Taylor out of Tennessee. 10 tackles for loss, 8.5 of which were sacks. For 1 forced fumble, 4 pass breakups in 2019. In his career at Tennessee, 26 tackles for loss, of which 19.5 of them were sacks, 6 forced fumbles, 7 pass breakups. So this guy is impacting the game in a multitude of ways. I had him as a late day 2 to an early day 3 pick. So I was thinking more along the lines of 3rd to 4th round for him. But the reason I'm not going to penalize the Seahawks for that is because I love this pick for them. If this were anybody else, I'd probably have an issue with him going in the second round, especially where he went in the second round. You're talking mid-second round here. But because it's Seattle and they do a really good job of getting the most out of guys off the edge, like a Cliff Averill, for instance, who I thought had some of his best years in the league in Seattle. Frank Clark and the maturation and the growth I saw from him in Seattle. I think it's the perfect home for a guy like Darrell Taylor with all the traits that he has. Adam is my number 8 edge rusher in this draft, so I thought this was a good spot for him to come off the board. Well-built NFL body, man. He looks the part. He is chiseled, man. He looks like a grade A edge rusher at the NFL level. Holds and serves at the point of attack. He's stout at the point of attack, man. He's really physical. And he's not one of these guys that looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. He looks like Tarzan, plays like Tarzan. All right. Plays with good leverage and knee bend. The part of the reason that he's so good at the point of attack is because he plays with excellent leverage. He's able to bend his knees, so he's able to get a little low and get up under the pads of that tight end, of that tackle, and stand him up, and be able to hold his ground. Can turn the corner with a nice dip and rip. That to me is that's 1A, and 1B has enough explosiveness to win around the edge, and because of that, it makes his inside counter move more dangerous. Those two right there, those two strengths, 1A and 1B. He can dip the edge and rip that corner, and he can bend it. And the explosiveness that he has threatens the tackle so much so that they feel the need to open up early, which gives him a free run on the inside. Those are the two things that I think he's going to be able to consistently win with at the NFL level. He's got a fastball and he's got an excellent changeup off the fastball. Now he's just got to learn some more pitches. All right. But you know what? When you've got two pitches that are extremely effective, if you master those, you don't really need anything else. But it's great if you can, find a split finger in there and add a changeup. The curve is nasty, the fastball is nasty. If you got a nasty fastball and then they're looking fastball and you bring a hook, okay, yeah, you got something there. All right. Now, if you can find a way to take a changeup that's 20 miles an hour slower than your fastball, whoa, is that you speed their bat up and now you come with something off speed, you really got him. And so if he can add a spin move, you get a guy opening up his hips and you spin back inside. Oh, we got something. So I tell you what, his ability to turn the corner, dip and bend that corner and rip to finish and turn that corner and flatten the edge, that's special, man. Not a lot of guys in the league can do that. He can. And then he has enough explosiveness to win around the edge, which threatens tackles, makes them nervous, makes them want to open up their hips sooner, which then gives him the ability to cross over and counter with an inside move. He looks to pry the football loose once he gets home. I love guys that understand that the kill shot is nice, but you know what's better? I could really care less if you even lay a finger on the quarterback. Get the football out. Give me a chance to turn that team over and shorten the field for my offense. All right? Hey, sacks are nice. Fumbles are even better. All right? And guess what? You get a sack if you force a fumble. That comes with it. All right? So he looks for the football. You may run him around as the tackle, but he'll stick his arm out and swat the ball down on his way around the quarterback and not lay a finger on him. And I'm all good with that. I love it. So he's a guy that once he gets there, he's looking to rip the football out and get that thing on the ground. His weakness is doesn't shed blockers at the rate his physical gifts suggest he should. So I talked about his ability to stack offensive linemen. I talked about him being stout at the point of attack against tight ends and tackles. He doesn't shed them though. Okay. That's a two-part equation. You stack them first and then you discard them. You shed them to get to the ball carrier. And he seems to be very content with just holding up at the point of attack. And there's more to that story than that. You have to be able to get rid of that guy, control the action, and when that running back comes your way, discard him, get to the ball carrier. He doesn't do that really at all. You see him stand up guys, but not necessarily get rid of them. Not a skilled pass rusher. And this is where the Seahawks come into play. This is why I feel confident he's going to be a good guy for them. And I love this pick for them because he needs to be refined. He needs to learn how to rush the quarterback. He needs to learn what it means to put together a rush plan. I think he's going to get that in Seattle. No plan whatsoever. Won't put moves together, not consistent with anything other than speed rush and speed to power. Right now, that's all he's looking to do is go speed on the outside and then try to translate that speed into power. STP is fine. But with all of that speed that you're generating and all of that nervousness and nervous energy you're generating from that tackle, you should be crossing over. You should be spinning back inside. You should be doing some things that attack that inside shoulder of that tackle, and you're not seeing that enough from Darrell Taylor. And so, again, no rush plan whatsoever. He's not a skilled pass rusher at this point. He's got skilled pass rusher traits. He does not have the actual he doesn't have the actual plan in place, and I think that's where the Seahawks are going to come in play. No hand usage whatsoever. That's the next weakness. And again, that's where the Seahawks come into play. If this guy ever learns how to use his hands with the physical gifts that he already has, look out. Darrell Taylor could be something special. And skills are lagging behind his talent. I've kind of illustrated that to you by talking about his lack of plan and not putting different moves in his arsenal and just looking to try to run past a tackle or bull rush him and not using his hands, not shedding guys at the point of attack. He's a guy that has a lot of workable traits, but doesn't have the skills necessary. His skills are severely lagging behind the talent. And so he needs someone to point him in the right direction. That's where the Seahawks come into play. And I think they're going to do some great work with him. My comp for him is Derek Morgan, the former first-round pick out of Georgia Tech that spent his entire career in Tennessee with the Titans. He was an okay edge rusher, but he had all the talent to be dynamic and elite, but he never manifested himself, and he never really took the talent that he had and allowed it to blossom into full-blown skill that translated to production at the NFL level. I hope the same thing doesn't happen for Darrell Taylor in this league, where he's got all the talent in the world, but never really turns that talent into skill. And hopefully he's able to be much more productive in his career than Derek Morgan ever was. But I see a lot of the same things that Derek Morgan was in his league in Darrell Taylor. In the second round, 48th overall selection, edge rusher out of Tennessee, Darrell Taylor for me is a 4. Had this not been the Seahawks, this is a 3, because I thought this was a little early for him, but the skill set doesn't meet the talent at this point, and that's where the Seahawks come in. I think they do a great job of coaching up talent and getting the most of it out of it, and I think they're going to have a chance to do that here with Darrell Taylor in the second round. So we move on from that selection and we go to the next one in this draft, third round, 69th pick overall. Offensive lineman out of LSU, Damian Lewis is the pick, 6'2", 327 pounds, 33-inch arms. This is a big man here. 15 games, 15 starts at right guard in 2019 for the national champion LSU Tigers. In his career, 28 games played in, 28 games started at right guard. I had a late day 2, early day 3 grade on him, so this kind of fits right in where I thought he would go. That's where the value in this draft was, particularly along the interior of the offensive line. I don't think we saw a single offensive lineman on the interior go until the third round, and then they started coming off the board like hotcakes. Now, there are a couple of guys that were drafted earlier that may ultimately kick inside the guard, like Robert Hunt, for instance, that was taken by the Dolphins at the top of the second round. He may stay outside at tackle. He may kick inside the guard, but when you're talking about true interior offensive linemen, guys that actually played the interior center or guard in college, I don't think we saw one come off the board until the third round, and boy, did they start flying off the board, and he's one of the better ones in this draft here, and so this was good value here, and this was a position of need for the Seattle Seahawks. Strengths, stout and low-centered frame. He's really stout, man. So much so that I put down in my notes, cancels the bull rush completely. Like, if you're going to try and bull rush Damian Lewis, don't, okay? Just cancel that idea. He's not going for it. I watched some of the best, the SEC and really college football for that matter, had to offer I'm watching guys like Derrick Brown and Raekwon Davis try and bull rush this guy, and Damian Lewis isn't giving any ground. None whatsoever. He's not backing up an inch from these guys. So the bull rush is not happening on his watch. So you can cancel that. So when I talk about stout and low center of gravity, you're talking about a guy that at 6'2", that 6'2" frame actually benefits him because he's getting up under guys' pads and he's got a lower center of gravity. So he's able to stay stout at the point of attack and not give ground, man. Plays good, sound assignment football. What I mean about that is a wise man once told me that when you're giving out grades for players, when they're in the film room and they're watching with their positional coach, there's 2 grades that are given out. One, did you do your job? Okay, you get a check, you get a grade for that. Did you actually do the job that you had to carry out? All right, did you take care of the task at hand? And then number 2 is, what was your technique in carrying out that task? Okay, so you may actually get a check for doing your job, but they may actually say you didn't do it well. All right, now you got the job done. All right, you served your purpose on that play, but technique-wise, you were horrible on that play. He's not always technique sound, but he gets his job done on every single snap just about, okay? Especially when you're talking about in the run game. So from that standpoint, plays sound assignment football. He's a phone booth brawler if I've ever seen one. One of those guys that in a small, tight, confined space doesn't lose. You put him in there with the likes of, and I just told you, a top 7 pick in this draft and a guy that should have been top 5, possibly top 3 in just about any other draft that didn't have multiple quarterbacks going in the top 5 and an elite pass rusher going. You're talking about a guy in Derrick Brown that was probably more of a top 5 pick in most years' drafts, went 7th overall, and he didn't want any smoke with this guy in the run game, and he's brawling with these guys. He's giving them work. Raekwon Davis, he dominated Raekwon Davis of Alabama. That's a guy that got selected in the 2nd or 3rd round by the Miami Dolphins. And he went to work, man. And this is the SEC we're talking about. He's seeing the best of the best competition week in, week out. And he held up every single week. Really impressed. And he does so much damage in a small, tight, confined space. Now, when you get him outside of that space and you start making him move around, different story. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But generates a ton of movement in the run game, whether he's got gap responsibility or he's on a down block. He is taking guys and moving them against their will. If he's blocking somebody on a down block, forget about it. That guy's going to get washed an entire gap, possibly more, out of the way. Now, if he's blocking someone of his own in gap responsibility or inside zone, whatever the case may be, he's wiping that guy out too. I mean, he's taking guys and driving them 3-4 yards off the ball, man. This guy is a mauler in the run game. That's his calling card, and I can't think of a better place for him to land. Maybe other than Tennessee or Baltimore or San Francisco, one of these teams. And I don't think he would fit in San Francisco because they want to stretch you. He's not athletically gifted enough to get out there and get to some of those reach blocks and things of that nature. But in a inside zone, in a gap responsible run game, this is the guy you want. This is the man for the job. Consistently looks for work. If he doesn't have anyone to block on a particular play, no one lined up over him, he's looking around. He's going to assess the landscape, make sure there's no late blitz, and then he's going to take somebody's ribs out. He's going to go just absolutely mollywop somebody. So he's a guy that consistently looks to be a part of the action. Love that. Played some of the best players in college football that college football had to offer. I mean, Raekwon Davis, as I mentioned, out of Alabama, Derrick Brown out of Auburn. The list goes on and on. LSU, we all know about the murderer's row schedule that they had. You're talking about games against Auburn or Florida, Auburn, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, who had a guy that in Neville Gallimore that was drafted high in this draft. I mean, you name it, he probably saw him at some point in college football playing in the SEC And I thought he held his own. Now, there were some times he struggled against the elite of the elite in Derrick Brown. But outside of that, man, I thought he played some of the best competition. So the NFL game isn't going to scare him one bit. Weaknesses. Length and lateral quickness are an issue. You know, when you watch him against Derrick Brown had a field day against LSU. And some of those wins came at the expense of Damian Lewis. And it was really the times where Derrick Brown's quickness was on full display and his length also was on full display. And Damian Lewis had no answer. And once you get this guy moving laterally, he's out of his element. He wants to keep you in that phone booth. He wants to keep you in that little box in his gap. You stay in his gap, he's very comfortable. You start moving around and you start using quickness and length, that's where he becomes outclassed, and that's when you start to see some of his real deficiencies on full display. Raekwon Davis didn't beat him often, but he beat him on one particular play, and it was with his length and quickness. You put those two things together, and that is Damian Lewis's kryptonite, all right? Plays with very inconsistent hands, which can get him into trouble. His hands are wide, and what wide hands are is really kryptonite for a guy with shorter arms. And when you already are at a disadvantage because your arms aren't as long, and it's not like he has tiny arms, but you know, when you got 33-inch arms and the guy across from you has 34-inch or 34.5-inch arms, and you're out here with your arms, and he's in here with your arms, you're not going to be able to reach him. He's going to get to you first, and you're going to be off balance and in trouble. He's got to do a better job of keeping his hands in tight, because the best and most direct path to any object is straight. He's going around, and that's going to get him into trouble. And it did get him into trouble against Derrick Brown. It did one time get him into trouble against Raekwon Davis. He's going to have to be better with his hands. And frankly, some of those times, his hands are outside the pads. It's a hold. So just from a standpoint of not wanting to hold, he needs to be better with his hand placement. His hands are too wide a lot of times. He's got heavy feet, and that's part of the reason his lateral quickness just simply isn't there. Heavy feet, can't move as well as you want him to, struggles at the second level. So that's not what he is as an offensive lineman. And then limited second level mobility, and I just talked about that because of the heavy feet. He's not a guy you want moving laterally. He's not a guy you want getting out there on screens and things of that nature. Look, he can peel off to the second level, and if that guy is right there in front of him, he'll get to him and he'll do damage. If that guy's moving around or he's got to go a considerable distance to get to that next guy, forget about it. That's just not what he does best. And so this guy was a JUCO transfer, spent the first 2 years of his career at a JUCO, came over to LSU and immediately contributed upon arrival and never looked back. And I think you got yourself a very quality offensive lineman here in the third round, 69th pick overall, offensive guard out of LSU. Damian Lewis for me is a 4. I really like this pick, man. Think that this guy is going to fit perfect on this offensive line, and this is exactly what the Seahawks need. Another physical presence up front that's going to create holes for a team that loves to run the football and pound teams into oblivion. That's what Damian Lewis does best. And for a guy like Russell Wilson, who needs the integrity of the pocket to be kept, I can't think of a guy better at doing that than Damian Lewis. You're not going to collapse a pocket with him. You're not going to bull rush Damian Lewis. So that's a nice pickup for the Seattle Seahawks in the third round. We go to the next pick, fourth round, 133rd pick. Tight end out of Stanford, Colby Parkinson is the selection. 6'7", 252 pounds, 33-inch arms, ran a 4.77 at the combine. So kind of fits in where most of the elite tight ends in this league currently are from a 40 standpoint. Zach Ertz, believe it or not, is a 4.7 guy. So, you know, Colby Parkinson isn't that far off. And he's a Stanford guy too, just like Zach Ertz. But that's where the similarities end. He's not Zach Ertz. So let's stop that right now. 48 catches for 589 yards and a touch in 12 games in 2019 for Colby Parkinson. For his career, 87 grabs for 1,171 yards, 12 scores in 39 games. I had a late day 2, so a third round to an early fourth round, early day 3, fourth round pick. So again, you guys fit right in that time frame there. So I thought that was good value. He was my 6th tight end on the board. And remember, in this particular draft, we didn't see a first round tight end, and we didn't see a tight end come off the board until the midpoint of the second round. So this is good value here where you got Colby Parkinson. Strengths, his size, obviously at 6'7", and 252 pounds, and he probably could add a few pounds to that frame and probably ultimately will. His catch radius is through the roof. Big guy, long arms, big size and length, paws. There's a lot to like there from a catch radius standpoint. Reliable hands. I thought at the tight end position in this particular draft, he was among the best in terms of his hands in this draft. Cole Kmet was right there with him, but not a ton of drops with Colby Parkinson. With some of these other guys that were deemed to be upper echelon tight ends and what was a rather weak tight end draft class, he was one of the few that you didn't see the ball hit the ground when it was targeted to him very often. Catches it in traffic. He's not a separator, so if you're not going to separate at a high level, you better be able to catch it in traffic, and he can do that. Can threaten the seam vertically. The 4.77 doesn't sound like a guy that's threatening the seam vertically, but he can rev it up. He's a big strider guy, so you allow him to open up, and all of a sudden, as a backer or a safety, he's on you in a heartbeat. And again, at 6'7", you throw it up there, it's hard for guys to go as high as he can for the football and bring it down. So he's a guy that can threaten the seam vertically. Can find the soft spots in zones. I think that's one of his best attributes right now is he knows where to go, where to sit down, where the soft spots are in the defense, where he can make himself an inviting and available target to the quarterback. And that's something else he brings to the table. He's a tremendous red zone target. At 6'7", you know that this is a guy that you can take full advantage of in the red zone. And the 12 touchdowns kind of speak to that. He had a game in 2018 versus Oregon State in which he had 4 first-half touchdowns. Count them, 4 first-half touchdowns, and a lot of them were just, kind of jump ball situations, throw it up, and Colby Parkinson is going to go and get it. And that's something that he does very well. Can be dispatched as a big slot option. They detached him a ton at Stanford and gave him opportunities to win in the slot. And again, not many guys are going 6'3", 6'4" at the linebacker or safety position. So you're talking about a 6-foot backer, a 6'1" backer on a 6'7" guy. You throw it up, let him go get it. Not many guys are going to be able to stop that. So he can be dispatched as a big slot option if you so desire. You go to his weaknesses. Doesn't fit the Stanford mold in terms of blocking. Generally, I liken Stanford tight ends to Iowa offensive linemen. Generally speaking, you get a guy from Iowa, you expect him to be a road grader, especially in the run game. He's going to maul guys, and he's going to be fundamentally and technically sound if you get a guy from Iowa as an offensive lineman. I kind of feel the same way at Stanford. You get a guy from Stanford, they're going to do one thing above all else, and that's block. Because David Shaw loves to put 3 tight ends on the field and run the football down your throat. All right. And so that's why it seems like every year or every other year, there's a new Stanford tight end entering the league, and they coach him up well at Stanford. And so he's not one of those guys, though. He's not really that good in the run game like you would expect from a Stanford tight end. And not to say that he can't ultimately get there, but he's not what you have come to expect, come to know and love from a Stanford tight end in the blocking department. Very stiff in his movements with or without the ball. He's somewhat mechanical. He's a big guy. It's tough for big guys to bend and change directions and that kind of stuff. And it's no different here. He's a stiff guy. So his movements aren't all that fluid, but nonetheless, that's not his calling card. That's not what's going to make him money in this league. His calling card, his bread is buttered by his size and his ability to box out guys and go and get the football. Limited yards or run after catch. Again, that's not what Colby Parkinson does. It's not why you select him here in the 4th round. You select him because he adds another option and another weapon for Russell Wilson to get the football to, and you're hoping that he continues to develop as a blocker as he continues to grow in the NFL. Has a tough time separating from defenders. Once again, this is why you use that frame, that 6'7" frame, to shield out defenders. Use your length and your catch radius to go and get the football, because he's not going to separate. He's not quick. He's not a tremendous route runner or anything of the sort. So guys are going to stay pretty much in his hip pocket. He's going to have to catch the football in some contested situations. Like I said, he does a great job of sitting down in zone coverage and knowing how to uncover there. But in terms of man-to-man, if you've got an athlete across from him, he'll stay in his hip pocket. He'll be there. You know, where that ball is delivered and will you give him a chance to catch it over a guy is another question. But him separating, not his thing. So Colby Parkinson in the 4th round for the Seahawks is a solid pick. My player comp for him is Gavin Escobar, the former, I want to say he was a Dallas Cowboy, was drafted in the league by the Cowboys. I want to say out of Texas Tech was Gavin Escobar. I always get him confused with Jace Amaro, who was drafted by the Jets. But big tight end, big guy, could catch the football, but really never found his way in the league. And we'll see if that happens to Colby Parkinson. Similar size, similar hands, coming in the league, never really manifested himself into much. Let's see if Colby Parkinson can find some success out here in Seattle with the Seahawks. For me, Colby Parkinson in the 4th round is a 3, man. Like this guy, like what he brings to the table. I think he'll be a good addition to this Seahawks football team as we move on to the next selection in this draft for the Seattle Seahawks. And we go to the 4th round once again. So 2 4th-round picks for the Seahawks in this draft. 144th pick overall, running back out of the U. DJ Dallas is the selection. 5'10", 217-pound back, ran a 4.58 at the combine. If I've ever seen a back that fits the Seattle Seahawks mold, it's DJ Dallas. He's got Seattle Seahawk written all over him. My comp for him is a former Seattle Seahawk back. It seems like you're chasing the ghost of Marshawn Lynch. I don't know if you'll ever find that guy or not, but this is a guy that breaks a ton of tackles, physical with the football in his hands. He looks like, you know, the rest of these guys that you've had over the years, whether you're talking Chris Carson or any of these other physical backs. I've got another one that was in Seattle for a brief spell that did some good things before moving on. And I'll tell you who that is a little bit later on because that's my comp for him. But 115 rushes for 693 yards and 8 scores to go along with 14 catches for 140 yards and 2 scores in 10 games in 2019. For his career, 265 yards or rushes for 1,527 rushing yards and 17 scores to go along with 28 receptions for 317 yards and 2 touches in 35 games. I had a mid to late day 3 pick, so you're talking 5th, 6th round. You took him a little bit sooner than that, but he fits your DNA profile of what a running back looks like in Seattle. I had him as my 17th rated running back in this year's draft, so he was down the list, so to speak. But physicality, plays with violence, and to me, that's the number one prerequisite for any Seattle Seahawks back. If you can run with your physicality, great. That's an added benefit and a plus that they more than welcome. But above all else, we need a physical, downhill, runs through arm tackles, yards after contact type of back. That's DJ Dallas in a nutshell. Forward lean. You rarely see this guy go backwards. My favorite game with him was the very first game of the season in 2019 versus Florida, where he's just bouncing off of guys and making things happen. He's got a touchdown run where he looks stopped and he bounces off of one guy, makes another guy miss, bounces off of somebody else, and then absolutely turns on the afterburners, runs past the entire Florida defense, and en route to a touchdown. Had another one where he looks like he's going to be tackled on a screen, bounces off a couple guys, uses his speed to get to the outside, and all of a sudden it's a foot race. He ends up getting pushed out of bounds inside like the 15-yard line or so. So that's, to me, what embodies the Seattle Seahawks running back, is the ability to break tackles, run through arm tackles, yards after contact, forward lean. All of these things are DJ Dallas to a T. Contact balance, I just talked about that, being able to get through contact, stay on your feet, and continue to churn out yardage. He does that with the best of them in this draft. Patience, really patient running back. And you'll see that when you watch him on film. And that's something else I think he brings to the table. Pass pro, I think he does a very quality job in the pass pro department. And so, Russell Wilson could use a really good pass blocking running back on third down. So I think that's something else DJ Dallas brings to the field. Yards after contact, I talked about that. That's what he does best and sets up his blocks well. I talked about the patience earlier, and that patience kind of aids in him setting up his blocks, which allows him to then cut off those blocks and get some more yards added on to his runs. So he does a really good job of setting up blocks with his patience. As we get to his weaknesses, lack of top end speed. He's not going to win many foot races with that 4.58, but he does have some really healthy acceleration. So although he's not a burner, you allow him to rev it up, and all of a sudden he's at top speed, and you find it hard to really catch DJ Dallas if you're not an elite speed guy. So no make you miss. See, that's not his calling card. It's not in his DNA. It's not what he does. You're going to have someone else in your backfield do that. That's not what he is about. He's not looking to make you miss. He's looking to run through you. And so that's not part of his game. Outside of toughness, no distinguishable traits. So, he's a guy that's a kind of a jack of all trades, master of none of them. Proficient at many, master of none, as I like to say. Pam Mon is what I like to say. Proficient at many, master of none. He does it outside of his toughness and his physicality that he plays with. Nothing about DJ Dallas really stands out. He's just a guy that kind of goes about his business yeoman-like. But to me, he's going to fit in Seattle because of that same thing. I mean, when you look around the Seattle Seahawks on the offensive side of the football, be honest with yourself. Outside of Russell Wilson, and maybe now the addition of the receiver out of Ole Miss last year, DK Metcalf, outside of those two guys, and I'm a bigger fan than most of Tyler Lockett, but even Tyler Lockett has some distinguishable traits, but he's not elite. Outside of DK Metcalf and Russell Wilson, on the offensive side of the football, what Seattle Seahawk stands out to you? What guys have real big-time discernible traits that stand out that are elite? Not many of them. Tyler Lockett kind of combines a lot of different things that he does extremely well, but that's not what the Seahawks are. They're a team comprised of guys who just do their job really well. And DJ Dallas is going to be another guy you add to the mix that does that. Career fumbles, 4 of them, all right, in a 3-year span. Really, 2018 was the year that he struggled holding on to the ball. He had 4 fumbles, 3 lost in 2018. In 2017 and 2019, he didn't have any fumbles. So for whatever reason, the ball was extremely slick in 2018 for DJ Dallas. If he can hold on to it, he's going to be a guy that the Seahawks get a lot of mileage out of. And I like the selection there in the 4th round, 144th pick overall. Running back out of Miami. DJ Dallas for me is a triple for the Seattle Seahawks as we move on to the next selection in the draft for the Seahawks. 5th round, 148th pick overall, edge rusher out of Syracuse. Alton Robinson is the pick, 6'3", 264 pounds, 32-inch arms, 9.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 of which were sacks, 1 forced fumble, 3 pass breakups in 2019 for his career, 34.5 tackles for loss, 19.5 of which were sacks 5 forced fumbles, 5 pass breakups. This is a guy that I had a day 3 grade on. Rounds 4 or 5 were where I thought he would have the best value. So tremendous value getting him in the 5th round. He was my 11th edge rusher in the draft. And just to go back to DJ Dallas quickly, my comp for him is Mike Davis, the ex-San Francisco 49er, ex-Seattle Seahawk running back out of South Carolina. Did some yeoman-like work for you. He reminds me a lot of Mike Davis. Stout, compact, physical. If you give him space, he can run. And so I think he's going to fit in Seattle. But back to Alton Robinson. To me, he is very similar to Darrell Taylor, who you drafted earlier, a guy with all the workable traits necessary to be a dynamic edge rusher, just needs all of that potential to be pulled out of him and turned into real production. And again, Seattle is the place that I think that can get done. Strapping NFL frame. Does that sound familiar? I said the same thing about Darrell Taylor. The Seahawks know what guys look like that fit into their system. So it's no wonder that they kind of look similar. Darrell Taylor was 6'4", 267. Alton Robinson, 6'3", 264. And they kind of look very similar. Explosive get off with dip and rip properties to match. Did I not say the same thing essentially about Darrell Taylor? So again, similar properties, similar DNA makeup, similar attributes. Again, the Seahawks know what they're looking for. So what makes them one of these teams that drafts extremely well? Can turn the corner and flatten to the quarterback. So again, another one of these guys that can shorten the edge, flatten to the quarterback, and use his explosiveness to create havoc off the edge. Looks to pry the football loose once at the quarterback. Again, I sound like a broken record. Where have you heard that before? Again, the Seahawks are looking for certain things in guys that they think will fit into what they want to do. Quickness to knife into the gap and be disruptive. This guy had a ton of tackles for loss in his career, 34 and a half to be exact. It's a lot of tackles for loss. And the reason he was able to amass so many tackles for loss is because of that quickness and his ability to knife into gaps and get to that ball carrier before he could even get started. So he's very disruptive at or around the line of scrimmage with his quickness getting into the backfield. Awesome closing speed. Lethal when unblocked backside. You know how in the NFL, a lot of times you don't block that backside defender because you don't figure he's going to have any impact on that particular play? Not wise to do that with Alton Robinson. You don't block him on the backside of a play. More likely than not, he's going to end up making the tackle. Now, it may be 1 or 2 yards up the field, but a run that may have had 7, 8, 9 yard potential, only going for 2 yards because you didn't block the guy on the backside is criminal. That shouldn't happen, but he's got the athleticism and, more importantly, the closing speed to be able to track a guy down backside if he is not touched. And so when he's able to break free from a tackle, turn that corner, he's able to quickly close that distance between he and the quarterback to get to him. Weaknesses. Frustrating inconsistency as a rusher. Doesn't apply all of his abilities. Where did you hear that already? Again, I hate to keep harping on this, but the reason the Seahawks make this pick here is because they see a guy that they feel like they're going to get him in their building with their coaching staff, and they're going to get this guy to become the best version of Alton Robinson possible. And that's why I like this selection. Has trouble disengaging from blocks. Again, where did you hear that? I digress. What happened to the 2018 Alton Robinson? That's probably the biggest knock I had on him, was that you saw a massive dip in production in 2019 out of Alton Robinson for whatever reason, and I can't really speak to it. I tried to figure out why. Was there a nagging injury he was dealing with? Was there a schematical change? What was the problem? Did teams start doubling him? Did he become the focal point that teams were keying in on when they played against Syracuse? I couldn't really find. I looked at him in a bevy of games, and I didn't see a lot of attention being paid to Alton Robinson. I didn't see him getting doubled. I didn't see him being chipped with a tight end or a running back going into his pass route. I just saw a guy that wasn't as productive for whatever reason. But in 2018, this guy had 10 sacks. In 2019, he only had 4.5. In 2018, he had 3 forced fumbles. In 2019, he had 1. In 2018, he had 17 tackles for loss. In 2019, he had 9.5. So, in the Pitt game in 2018, that's the game that did it for me. If you want to go see the best of Alton Robinson, if you want to see Alton Robinson at his absolute best and the guy that you want him to become at the next level, go watch him against the Pitt Panthers in 2018. That's the guy that you're hoping he turns into on a consistent basis at the NFL level. And I'll just read this to you quickly because this is on the Carfax. Transferred from Northeast Oklahoma A&M after 1 season to Syracuse. He was slated to go to Texas A&M, but a robbery charge and an incident with his girlfriend got his scholarship pulled. Charges were later dropped, so he was not charged with anything in that matter. However, that's on the Carfax. It's something to keep in mind. But at the end of the day, my comp for him is Whitney Merciless. The Houston Texans dynamic edge rusher when he wants to be. Whitney Merciless is a guy that for 2 years was dominant, and in 2 years he was on a milk carton. All right. So what Alton Robinson are you getting? Are you getting the 2019 Alton Robinson that looked like a shell of himself from 2018? Or are you getting the dominant 2018 Alton Robinson that has a chance to come in and be a double-digit sack getter at the NFL level? That's the real question. We don't know the answer to that right now, but I love the team that he's on. They're going to help him potentially get to that double-digit sack status in the 5th round, 148th overall selection. Edge rusher out of Syracuse, Alton Robinson for me is a 3. I think this is a guy that can come in and help. And I love the fact that the Seahawks doubled down on a position of need. Edge rusher was by far and away my biggest need for them coming into this draft. It was the thing that I thought they didn't do enough of last season. I think they were one of the worst teams at getting after the quarterback last season from a statistical standpoint. I get it. Jadeveon Clowney, I'm one of those guys that doesn't always pay attention to the numbers, but I watched enough Seattle Seahawks football to know that they didn't, without Jadeveon Clowney, there wasn't anyone else you had to really worry about getting to the quarterback. So I love the fact that they doubled down on that particular position in the draft. We move on to the next selection, 6th round, 214th overall selection, wide receiver out of Florida. Freddie Swain is the selection, 6 feet, 197 pounds, ran a 4.46 at the combine, so he can run 38 receiving receptions for 517 yards and 7 scores in 2019. Also had 14 punt returns for 56 yards in those scores in 12 games in 2019. For his career, 68 receptions for 996 yards and 15 scores. So that's a lot of touchdowns in not a ton of receptions. You're talking about a guy that you're looking at every 5 or so catches is scoring a touchdown. That's a really prolific number there. And then 39 punt returns for 308 yards and a touch. So gives you a little bit of special teams value as well. 47 games was where those stats were totaled. Got a 5th round grade on Freddie Swain. And to get him in the 6th round, I thought was tremendous value. So you look at his strengths, solid size and speed as a slot option. This is a guy that primarily played in the slot at Florida, and I think you're going to use him in the same capacity. And you drafted a guy last year out of Hawaii in the 7th round that I thought would make a quality slot. I think Freddie Swain is a better and a receiver and an upgrade over that receiver you took in Hawaii, out of Hawaii last year in the 7th round. So you're upgrading the slot here with Freddie Swain. Above average quickness. He's a guy that has some really good quickness, is able to win at the stem of a route, is able to shake free, make himself a nice, open, inviting target for the quarterback. There are not enough guys in Seattle that are able to do that right now. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, for all intents and purposes, are on a short list of guys that can separate. add Freddie Swain to the list automatically. He comes in, and I think he's your third best receiver right off the bat. Right out of the gate, right off the bus. Freddie Swain is your third best receiver, I believe, in Seattle. Quality route runner, good deception, lots of dandruff, man. Lots and lots of dandruff. And if you haven't been following me, dandruff is head and shoulders. All right, gives a lot of head and shoulder fakes that allow guys to be deceived in where Freddie is trying to go with his route. I think he runs some quality routes, man. You could complain about certain things and certain aspects of his route running, but for the most part, he gets open running routes. And that's what a quarterback wants to see from a guy in the slot. Willing to do the dirty work. He's willing to go over the middle of the football field. So he's willing to run that 10-yard, that 12-yard dig route. Knows that he's going to get hit. Doesn't care. He's willing to block. He's a guy that's not 200 pounds, but willing to throw his body around for the sake of his team. So willing to do the dirty work. He'll work for food. He'll go over the middle. I like that about Freddie Swain. Catching traffic. I just talked about him going over the middle of the field. And sometimes he's got a defender on his back, and he's still able to pull the football in. So that's something else you want from your slot guys, the ability to catch the football in traffic. He's a reliable option. I like Freddie Swain a lot. A lot of the attention for Florida went to Van Jefferson, and rightfully so. Van Jefferson was an absolutely gifted route runner at Florida, and he was drafted in the second or third round by the Rams. I think it was the third round by the Rams. It's a great pickup for them. He'll fit right in with their offense. And Freddie Swain was a guy that didn't get as much pub, but I thought his ability to be a reliable target for whomever was at quarterback, whether you're talking Kyle Trask or their young quarterback that was behind Trask, he did some good things, man. Felipe Franks early in the season before he got injured. Freddie Swain is a reliable option, and I think Russell Wilson will come to love Freddie Swain and what he brings to the table. Adjusts well to the football. He makes the quarterback right. Nothing a quarterback cherishes more than a guy that can make them right when they're wrong. You make a low pass that probably should be incomplete. He goes down and digs it out. You throw a ball that's a little behind Freddie, he's going to make a diving stab. Like Freddie Swain does a good job of making his quarterback right. He adjusts very well to the football. He's got a little MYM in him, make you miss. It's not elite, but it's enough that if a guy comes up reckless and out of control, he can make a miss. And then offers you a little bit of special teams value as well. Can return punts and kickoffs. And so that's a little something extra that he adds. If you so choose, he can help you on punt returns. Weaknesses. Loves to set up routes with hop and hezzy. And I was taught as a young receiver, no hop and hezzy. We're not doing that. Because anytime you leave your feet as a receiver, you give up the ability to defend yourself. Try jumping in the air and then having someone lay hands on you. You can't stop yourself. You can't fight that guy off. You're in the air, and he can do whatever he wants to you at that point. And generally, if a guy lays hands on you while you're in the air, you're either going to go flying backwards or sideways. At worst, he's going to stop your momentum. And he loves to hop in the air and then give you a hezzy. And nothing screams, I'm about to do something at the stem of my route like a hop and hezzy. Nothing says to that safety. Nothing says to that corner or that backer, hey guy, I'm about to make a move. Watch me. Like a jump into the air and then a shake. Something's coming at this point. Now, what is coming after that? You don't know. But don't telegraph it. Just get right to business. So I'd like to see him do less of that. I'm not saying totally eliminate that from your game, but I'd like to see him do less of it. Lacks sharpness on in and out breaking routes. He will drift from time to time. And so, look, there are two ways to run in and out breaking routes. And if you're a stop on the dime, sharp, come down the line guy, great. To me, that's the best way to run a route. But then there's a second way to do it, and it's called rolling out of breaks. And if you roll out of your breaks, that's fine too. Just don't drift. And Freddie Swain is a roller. He rolls out of his breaks, which is fine. Just don't drift up the field. If you roll out of your breaks, it means it's not sharp. It's rounded. That's fine if you round out of your break on an outbreaking route. Just don't drift up the field. There's a difference between rolling out and then drifting as you roll. Because if you roll out but you stay flat, that corner can't undercut your route. But if you roll and you drift, he can then take a sharp angle to the football, and it allows for a play to be made. He drifts sometimes. That's something he's got to clean up. He's somewhat of a body catcher. Look, I'm not going to beat him up for that. Some people are off-put by guys that allow the ball into their body. As long as you catch the football, you're all right by me. And he catches the damn football, so I don't have any issues with Freddie Swain using his body to catch the football. We'll have to do a better job of fighting off physicality at the line of scrimmage and at the point of catch. He's a smaller framed guy at a $197. And, guys can displace him at the line of scrimmage, alter his route. And even at the point of catch, when you get into hand fighting and more physical play with these NFL defenders, he's going to have to be stronger at the point of catch to make plays and be able to help his quarterback out. But I love this player here in this position. You got him. I think this is excellent value. Played through a torn labrum in his freshman season and had surgery after that year. So that's a ways back. You're talking about a guy that played 3-4 years at Florida. And so that's on the Carfax. Just thought I'd mention it. But I think this is a guy that's going to come in and contribute right away. And I'll take it a step further. My player comp for him is Randall Cobb. And we know how good and productive Randall Cobb has been in this league. I'd like to think that Freddie Swain can be just as dynamic and productive as Randall Cobb has been in this league. And Russell Wilson could use another reliable target in Seattle to get the football too. So in the 6th round, 214th pick overall, wide receiver out of Florida, Freddie Swain for me is another 3 for the Seattle Seahawks as we go to the final pick in this Seahawks draft. 7th round, 251st pick overall, tight end out of LSU, Stephane Sullivan is the selection. 6'5", 248 pounds, 35-inch arms, ran a 4.66 at the combine out of LSU. 12 receptions for 130 yards and no touchdowns in 15 games at the tight end position. But for his career, 34 catches. Well, actually, in the 2 years previous, he played the wide receiver position, 34 catches for 582 yards and 3 touchdowns in 26 games. And it seems like, if I'm hearing everything correctly, the Seahawks are going to convert him back to wide receiver. They like him as a receiver more so than a tight end, which I think is the right thing to do with him. He isn't built to be a tight end, and they're going to move him back to receiver. So I think they felt like the success of DK Metcalf last year and his size and his ability to go get the football, Stephane Sullivan is a guy that they like him to be able to do some of the same things that DK did, go up, get the 50-50 ball like DK did in the playoff game versus Philadelphia in Wild Card Weekend last year. And Stephane Sullivan is fully capable of doing that. And nobody, to me, throws a better deep ball, a better 50-50 ball than Russell Wilson. Nobody does a better job of creating off schedule than Russell Wilson and maybe Patrick Mahomes. But they're 1A, 1B. And, Stephane Sullivan is a guy with size that can go up and get the football. And so this was a guy that was highly recruited out of high school to be a receiver at LSU. And they felt good about getting Stephane Sullivan. And for whatever reason, he just didn't develop the way that they wanted him to. And other guys came in like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and ended up elevating over him. And next thing you know, he's converting over to tight end. And I'll just say this. This is a guy that I think the Seahawks, this is where they make their money. This is where the Seahawks separate themselves from most teams in the league. Back into the draft, undrafted guys, priority free agents, finding guys that are diamonds in the rough, blowing the dust off of them, shining them up, and getting them to perform at a high level. It's what they do best. And Stephane Sullivan is a guy that no one was thinking about, probably wasn't going to be drafted if Seattle doesn't take him. We all heard the call that he got and his reaction and stop playing, coach, stop playing. We all heard the call and his excitement. He didn't think he was getting drafted at that point. He thought he was going to have to prove himself in camp as a PFA, and to get the call, his excitement, and the Seahawks to convert him back to wide receiver potentially. I think it's all good for Stephane Sullivan. And I'll tell you this, if nothing else, 6'5", he's 248. He's going to drop weight because that's not his natural playing weight. He bulked up to 248 to try to play tight end. He's probably going to be more around 230, 225, somewhere in there. But the 6'5" is great, but the 35-inch arms, are you kidding me? That right there, coupled with the fact that he's probably going to run faster than 4.66 because he's going to drop some of that weight. You look at that wingspan and that size with Russell Wilson getting him the football, I think that this guy has a chance to be dynamic for the Seattle Seahawks. He's not a great route runner. He does not separate well. As a matter of fact, he runs to contact down the field, which slows him down, bogs him down. But you talk about back shoulder fades. You talk about a guy in a 50-50 situation being able to go up and high point the football. I watched him versus Rice, and I said, forget about the 19 tape because he was playing tight end in 2019, and that's not what the Seahawks are going to do with him. So I went back to 2018 because that's a better representation of what he's going to be for Seattle. And so I watched him in 2018 when he was a receiver, and he goes up, watch him against Rice. That was his best game of his collegiate career. And he goes up and he gets the football in the end zone, 40 yards down the field for a touchdown, strong hands. So when I watch him in that game, I watch him against UCF in the bowl game and watch him make plays, strong hands, in tight contested coverage. I said, why can't he do that at the next level? And there's nobody better than Russell Wilson to get him to rock. So, and you can use him as a big slot. You can use him because he blocks very well. He's physical in the run game as a detached blocker, not in line. That's why he wasn't suited to be a tight end. But when you have him out wide as the front man on a wide receiver screen or a hitch, he's going to block his ass off. And in Seattle, where they pride themselves on having their receivers block in the run game because they're going to run it down your throat, he's a guy that can help you in that department as well. So I like this pick for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm anxious to see if they're able to get the most out of Stephane Sullivan. He, to me, best comps to Matt Jones. Who? Matt Jones, the ex-Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver. Once upon a time was a first-round pick out of Arkansas. Big 6'6" frame, could go up and get the football. The only difference between Sullivan and Jones is Matt Jones was a straight-up fast blazer. 4'4" guy. I think he ran a 4.39 or so at the combine. He could pick him up and put him down, could Matt Jones. That's not what Stephane Sullivan is. But when you talk about, frame and catch radius, Matt Jones was a red zone target. The same thing can be said for Stephane Sullivan. So I like this pickup for the Seattle Seahawks, especially where you got them, back into the draft, 7th round, few final picks. I thought this was a solid pickup for the Seahawks. For me, it's a 2. Anxious to see if they get anything out of him, if he makes their football team, how they are able to bring him along, and ultimately, is he able to contribute on this Seattle Seahawks roster moving forward. So that's going to do it for the Seattle Seahawks and their 2020 NFL Draft. How did they do? 26 points overall when you tally up all of the scores that they were able to produce. You divide by the number of picks, 8, and you are left with a 3.25 for the Seattle Seahawks in this draft, which nets itself out to be a B-. So a really quality draft by the Seattle Seahawks. I think they did themselves some justice in this draft, added some players, especially the edge rushers. I'm really excited about both of those guys landing in Seattle. Love the pickup of Damian Lewis. Think he's going to come in and immediately add value to that offensive line. And Jordan Brooks also comes in and helps right away. I think you got guys that are going to come in and contribute right away. So anxious to see how all of this works. Freddie Swain, another guy that I think is going to contribute right away. I love this draft by the Seattle Seahawks. John Schneider and company, they did it again, and the Seahawks are going to continue to be one of the better teams in the NFC Conference. That's going to do it for your man Louie T here on the Draft Wrap-Up series of the Seattle Seahawks. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications because there is more to come. So stay tuned for more content, whether it's Seahawks or draft prospects or draft wrap-up series or what may have you. Plenty more where this came from. Also, make sure you're following me on Twitter at Louie T Network and on Instagram. Louie T Network _ is the handle on IG. So with that being said, scoring metric can be found down in the description along with all of my links to all my various platforms. Make sure you check that out as well. I'm your man Louie T signing off. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not, I repeat, not the best NFL coverage it could be. Until next time, I'm signing off. Make sure you stay safe out there. Take care. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Louie T Network.